particle flow without having to go into, the particle view and play with them in there and be dealing with a schematic view. Now, Zookeeper can also use the particle flow events and everything else in a schematic view. So we're going to drag it into there. Let's just drag this into a new schematic view. And here you can see the particle flow source event. Now, I want to stress that, this is for editing your particle flow setups and how it interacts with things with Macs or controllers or other objects. By no means does this replace particle view or a lot of the event-based things that you might do in there, but it's a nice way to visualize how particle flow is affecting different objects in your scene, interacting with them, assigning controllers, and doing other sorts of things like scripting or expressions or things like that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of show you how this stuff lays out here in Zookeeper's schematic views, and you can see that you have your render events and whatever events happen to be in your particle view. So you can drag all those out. I'm going to just go back in here. You can see you have all these things from birth to speed to the display and anything like that. Now this particular particle flow setup has been arranged with an instance shape node. So if I drag out that instance shape node, you can see that it has a shape object. If I drag out that shape object, you can see that it's this teapot in the scene. So this is where we start to kind of play around with all the different things in the 3ds Max scene. If we had materials applied or other things, we could see those here. And you can see this has a modifier stack and a squeeze modifier applied to that instance geometry, which is really pretty neat. Now, one other thing that you can see is the scale is actually being controlled by a controller. So I'm going to drag out that controller, and you can see that it's actually an expression controller that is connected to this object speed. So let me just lay this out so it's a little bit more clear what's going on. So we have a Bezier float controller that is controlling the speed of these particles, and it's going through an expression controller that's just dividing that by 50 and getting piped into the scale of the object. So, basically when the object's smaller, they're going to be going slow, and when they get larger, they're going to be a little bit faster, which is kind of a fun setup. So let me just double click on our display node. And we could either set it in here. I can go in and set this to display our objects. And you can see that these guys are really very big. So what I'll do is just decrease their size a little bit. And now you can see them all falling like so. And if we wanted to, we could double click on this node or the instance node and get any of the information we wanted over here as well. Let's just add a little something to this so that we can get an idea of how that works. Let's also take this Bezier float and control the bulge amount of this squeeze. So I can drag that back just so that it's a little easier to understand. And basically now, as these guys are of a certain size, so let's crank this size up. When they start to get bigger, the bulge amount's going to make them squeeze a little bit more. So these are squeezed a little bit too much, I would say, and I want this value to control everything. So what I'm going to do is the same thing that I did here and apply a quick expression controller. Now that's really easy to do in Zookeeper, and that's one of the things that I like the most. So if I click on this line and just type in float expression, what'll happen is it'll insert that expression in between these two, and I can always double click to go into the expression and do something a little bit more complex, but if I don't want to, this automatically adds it as an X variable, and I can just type in X in the name divided by 20, and that will be our expression for this particular node. So now you can see that when we adjust this, as they get larger, they start to stretch out more, but they're not, super stretched. And when they're smaller, they're not as stretched, and you can see that that goes through the expression controller, which is pretty interesting. So now as I make them small over here, and we go back and just press play, you'll see that they go pretty slow, and they're not stretched out too much. And as I make them quite a bit larger and go back to frame 0, they fall a lot quicker, okay? And if we wanted them to fall even quicker than that, I could apply an expression controller here. So I'll just type in float expression, and I'll say X times, I don't know, 10. And now the speed is going to be adjusted slightly for that, which is really pretty quick and easy to do. So if I go back here, now they should be falling much, much faster because that's being times by 10. So that's a little bit on how you can interact with particle flow using Zookeeper. You have access to all of your nodes, how they pipe in, how they interact with everything else in the scene, and setting up controllers for any particle flow input. So just to recap, we looked at how we can use particle flow in Zookeeper in both the object and layers views as well as in the schematic view. How you can have access to all the different nodes of particle flow and wire them into different scenarios. We also looked at setting up an environment cloud setup that you'll be able to adjust and set up things like your lighting and effects and different parameters with materials that will allow you to have a parametric sky setup that you can easily adjust inside of a composite node and only output the different parameters that you might need. So you can have kind of a tool that will allow you to set up different skies for your backgrounds over and over. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much.